we have Captain James Lee, who has, I can't even tell you how much experience. He's the Commodore this year of King Harbor Yacht Club. He owns a monohull and a catamaran. He's delivered a boat across the Atlantic. He can tell you more all about him and tell you all about cruising the Channel Islands. So let's bring up Captain James Lee.
All right, well, good evening, everybody. This is fantastic. And every chance I can talk about getting out in the water, I love talking about it because that's where we all want to be, right? It's 70s and sunny here in, in January in LA. So I'm going to talk about cruising the Channel Islands because this is my favorite place to cruise around Southern California waters. And just a little bit about myself. So I own, as Molly said, I own two boats, a Vaquier 40 and then an XS11. And I race and cruise both of those up and down here in California. Also sail in the Mediterranean, Atlantic, Europe side, as well as the US side and the Pacific coast as well. There's actually a couple of interesting books. The Diary of a Sea Captain's Wife and the Legendary King of San Miguel. If you want to learn more about the Channel Islands, these are cool books to read. And there is actually a very good documentary called West of the West. And it was basically sponsored by the Santa Cruz Island Conservancy. And guess who was the president of that? That was Joe Walsh of the Eagles. So if you watch this documentary, he's in it, and he's really passionate about the Channel Islands and Santa Cruz Island in particular, and you get to see why once you've seen it. And so I know this is a bit of an eye chart, so I'm going to be just talking through. Just look at the pretty pictures. I'll talk through all this. So here are the Channel Islands. So this is LA. Palos Verdes, that dot's where my house is because that's where I took the screenshot of this. But everyone knows Catalina. There's San Clemente. There's San Nicolas. How many of you read The Island of Blue Dolphins? How many know that that's the island of Blue Dolphins? Yeah, so that's the Island of Blue Dolphins. And Santa Barbara Island. And then we got what we know is the Channel Islands, but actually all of these are part of the Channel Islands. So there's Anacapa, Santa Cruz, Santa Rosa, and San Miguel. And Santa Barbara is right there. And so I'll talk a little bit about that because that's all part of the community up there. These islands are actually were never part of the mainland here. These islands are part of a plate that goes down to San Diego and have gone northward. And as sea levels have risen, have kind of created these were underwater mountains from that tectonic plate. So there's evidence of pygmy mammoths that have crossed the water to get to these islands from the mainland. So it's kind of cool, a lot of history there. And it's 45 miles from Marina del Rey to the closest island at Anacapa. So it takes into the wind, but if you leave early enough, there's no wind. And some fog. But we know, so here's a close-up of Anacapa, and there's Santa Barbara. So there are harbors nearby. So Santa Barbara is one of them, and that's 21 miles to Scorpion Ranch at Santa Cruz, a popular place. There's Ventura Harbor, and there's also Channel Islands Harbor, and that's only 10 miles to Anacapa. So you're there. So a lot of people will go up to these harbors, spend some time over there, and you're right there. It's so much closer than Catalina is for us. And once you get in here, as I'll kind of explain, all these harbors are options. So you're just never really more than a few hours away to go into a harbor if you really need to, which is really important because sometimes the weather can get a little nasty out there. And this is the direction of the prevailing wind and current. So as you can see, there are better anchorages or shelters than others. But it all depends because sometimes if you get a south wind, then all of a sudden other things can become more vulnerable, but other places become more sheltered. So you just have to watch the weather there. And this is called Windy Gap for a reason because every afternoon it really does kick up, But if you're going between Ventura, maybe in Santa Barbara, Port Hueneme, it could be a really quick reach, which is really nice for sailboats. So it's a great sailing area. And then there's something called the marine layer. This is Avalon, and there's a Royal Caribbean cruise ship over there. I am moored right here on the edge of it, and I'm flying my drone around here, trying not to lose it. But I'm just amazed at this view. I see a little bit of the casino there, but imagine you're on a boat trying to get in and out of this harbor.
Yes.
My recommendation is if you're here, just stay there, because this will blow off eventually. So. But the marine layer is a constant phenomenon that occurs up in the Channel Islands, especially up there, because of the mountains and then the cool waters, and you just have to be mindful of that. And the shipping channel. So with the weather, the marine layers, and this really busy shipping channel between Northern California and the port of LA and Long Beach and going further south, you really have to be mindful, and it's imperative that you monitor VHF 16 at all times. Not only that, but sometimes things happen out there and people need help. And so that's also very important. So first island, Anacapa Island, it's a very rugged island. It's really not for going ashore type of thing. And so it's real pretty. It's got an Anacapa light on it for a particular reason, because a ship ran aground into it in 1853. 500 people strewn all over the island, no casualties, but they ran into it during fog, and they ended up on a place called Frenchie's Beach. And this is Frenchie's Beach right there. But this is I'm flying my drone, and this is where I'm anchored. So it gives you an idea of kind of the dramatic coastline and the scenery that they have there. So it's a sandy bottom. It's pretty nice, but it can be very exposed when you got more northwest and north winds. And that's the beach right there. So this is when I'm headed up there, this is kind of a favorite lunch spot. So I'll leave early in the morning, say from Marina del Rey to King Harbor, and then we'll be up here right around lunch, drop anchor, just take a break, because Santa Cruz Island is not far away. But then you can also see what the weather's like and decide to Santa Cruz whether you're going to go towards the north side of it or on the other side of it. So it kind of depends on the weather. Because you can always look at the forecasts, but it never fails that the forecast is not right sometimes. And so the best thing to do is see what it's like when it's out there. And these are all the Santa Cruz anchorages, at least all the popular ones. And the ones that we'll probably go to are Smugglers, which is a really popular one here, Scorpion Ranch, which has a visitor center, Prisoners and Pelican. And then there's the Painted Cave up on that side, and I got cut off. It's Forney's Cove on the far end of Santa Cruz. Those are traditionally the anchorages on this side. Alberts and Coches, Prieto, and Willows, they're on this side and are really nice for prevailing winds, but when there's a south swell, say during wintertime in New Mexico, it turns into surfing conditions over there, and you don't want to be there. So anyway, I'll talk a little bit about each one of these places. So Scorpion Ranch is really cool because this is where the National Park Visitor Center is. So it is a national park, and there are national park rangers there, and they have a really neat visitor center, which is part of what was the ranches, the ranch housing there. And they have exhibits there, and they have Island Packers is the operation that brings tourists from Ventura to Scorpion Ranch and Prisoners, and they drop them off at this pier. So that's my boat anchored behind Scorpion Rock. So this is Scorpion Rock, and that provides a nice little shelter from a west wind. And it's nice and smooth back in here. So it's kind of neat because you get on your dinghy and then you cross this little gap and you watch this clear water, the bottom, come up to just a couple feet, and then you're just going on your dinghy, just watching the rocks go by. So you do have to be careful because there's quite a few in there. But it's real pretty, and then this is all kelp. So you got to navigate your way through the kelp beds, and then you bring your dinghy onto the beach over there. So on the north wind conditions, this gets pretty nasty, and so a lot of people go over to the other side to Smugglers and Yellowbanks. So there's this really kind of neat place called Potato Harbor because it looks like a potato from up above. And most people will just go right by it and never know it's there because there's this very narrow opening. So this is facing directly northwest. So if you have a northwest swell or wind, this is not a great place to be.
Man.
But anything else, you are sheltered by steep cliffs on 3 sides. So it is a really good shelter. This is flew this drone when it was a little bit foggy. And you can see a little bit of the ripples that I was getting from a little bit of northwest wind. Prisoners Harbor is kind of interesting because there's a pier there, and Island Packers delivers tourists and hikers there. And so they'll go hiking throughout the island, and this is the old watchtower. They used to have a watchman up there, and these were buildings left over from the ranch days. And there's a nice hike from here over to Pelican Bay, which I'll go to next. And that will run you probably like a good solid 3 hours or so. It's a pretty good hike. This is Pelican Bay, and this is probably, I would say, the most popular place to anchor in Santa Cruz, simply because it has these really nice cliffs. The prevailing wind comes from here.
I should do all that.
So if you're tucked in here, is like, it's really nice. I mean, I had my friends there last July, and they were remarking that they'd wake up and they'd think they're like in Italy or Greece. I'm seriously, because it really, you feel like you don't feel like you're in California anymore. You don't feel like you're in Los Angeles anymore. You're really kind of out there, and it's really peaceful and quiet, and you got a lot of wildlife and birds and so forth. So, and you can see, this cliff continues down for another 20 feet to a sandy bottom. So you could anchor, nestle up nice and close to it, and that's why I recommend carrying a second anchor. And this is a really interesting, this is Cueva Valdez, and this is a cave that opens up to the water and also has an entrance to the beach. So, I mean, it's like Pirates of the Caribbean kind of stuff. And in this book, Diary of the Captain's Wife, this was written in the late 1800s, she describes all these encampments they used to have on Santa Cruz Island. And one of them was at this place, because there's a natural spring up in this valley. And they had a wooden structure there, and people were dropped off there, and they would spend weeks or months living out on the island. I mean, this is what they used to do back then. But this is a real pretty spot. And this is, again, during normal prevailing winds, if you're tucked right in here, it's nice and calm. But if the winds start to come from the north, then it gets pretty exposed. And if it's
still using the spring for the water?
No, bring your own water. It is a pretty dry place. But here you're kind of in the middle of the island. The island is 20 miles long. So if you know that north winds are coming, you probably don't want to be like in the middle. You want to stay towards the end so you can duck over the other side if you need to, because everything on this side of the island will get exposed in the north winds. And then the Painted Cave, this is really something. I mean, how many of you know that this is the longest publicly accessible sea cave in the United States.
Mental.
Yeah, it's 1,200 feet into the island. The opening is over 130 feet tall. So I've seen pictures of people putting their boats right in the mouth of it. I didn't do that.
Yeah.
But as you can see, this is some of my crew was going with a kayak and going in there, and it goes a long way. 1,200 feet is a long way, and it narrows down into a small opening, and then that small opening opens up to this large cavern, and there's a beach at the end of this large cavern where there's sea lions that live in there, and when they see people coming in there, they start making a ruckus because you're in their territory now. And it's pitch dark, so you need to bring a good strong torch, absolutely pitch dark, and you got sea lions going nuts. And the last group that I sent in there, because I stood an anchor watch because I was on the boat here, I said, go in there, you'll be fine. They forgot to take any video inside because they were a little tense. But
Martin Chase.
yeah, and so that's a picture from inside. That's getting down. That's not even to the final opening. And this is the next cove over is where we anchor, and then you can go into the cave, or you can anchor in front of the cave, but it's so narrow that you need to have an anchor or someone on anchor watch on the boat. And I did bring so this is what it looks like inside it. This is a video I took. All right.
Go back to the beach.
I got the lights on at the beach.
Don't bring like a little pen light. Bring a torch. Bring a big dive light or something, because and bring a backup. Yeah, because if that goes out, then it's going to get really
That
interesting.
narrow passage, is it still passable at high tide?
Yeah, I've even at high tide, I've never had a problem. You might have to duck a little bit, but it'll never close as far as I've seen.
Famous last words.
Yeah. So as we're moving towards the west end of Santa Cruz, there's probably my favorite anchorage is Forney's Cove. This is on the very western tip of Santa Cruz, and the prevailing winds are coming from there going this way. So even though you may not have great wind shelter, you have this spit of land that provides a really nice shelter from the waves. So it's very nicely air conditioned. So you will stay cool there. In fact, you probably would close the hatches or just crack it open and bundle up in there. So, and there's a lot of kelp in there, so you do have to kind of watch out. But it is absolutely a very pretty beach. There's hiking all over the place. Tide pools all over the place. There's this monument is over on this corner. It was for a free diver who died over on the other side, and so they put a marker there for him. And just the abundance of wildlife is just extraordinary. I mean, in this one picture, there's abalone, mussels, sea urchins, and sea anemones, and so forth. And this is a good jumping off point to go to Santa Rosa or San Miguel if one was so inclined. So on the southern part of the island is this place called Cochas Prieto, which is really nice during most prevailing winds. However, an interesting phenomenon happens here is that between night and day, because of the change in the temperatures, the wind can switch 180 degrees in here. So be mindful of your neighbor and where your anchor is, and just making sure that you don't end up on top of them when the wind switches. But it's real pretty. It's a nice sandy bottom, a lot of kelp, and there's a lot of good fishing in the reef over here. And this was, I was up there a couple years ago when they were having fires up in the Ventura, and that's why it was kind of smoky skies up there. So this is Santa Rosa Island, and really the only good anchorage over there is called Betcher's Bay, and that is only 7 miles from Forney's Cove. So from Forney's Cove, you can see Santa Rosa over there. But one of the hard parts about Santa Rosa is that this is what the terrain looks like, and this is Betcher's Bay, and the prevailing wind comes right over that land. That land acts like an airfoil and accelerates that wind in the afternoon. And this, although you won't have waves from the wind, you'll have pretty intense winds. And I've been in there where I've, with my monohull, I don't know if you ever encountered that, when the wind is so high, the boat starts fishtailing back and forth. So you got to put a secondary anchor out there to keep that bow in one place. So that's a lot of fun. And it gets pretty shallow. So you're in 20 feet or less, lots of kelp. One time I went and anchored in here and forgot that I was trolling a line, and we got the line of my fishing pole wrapped around the rudder and the prop. So my good friend, he went down and with a knife and cut it all off. And so, yeah, he's a very good friend, very good friend. Yeah, that gets windy up there. So San Miguel Island is even more remote, and the only really good anchorage there is a place called Kyler Harbor. This is just a few miles from Santa Rosa. It is the home of a lot of pinnipeds, sea lions, and seals. Lots of them. This is a beach on the north side. This is not a favorite anchorage area. But it is also allegedly the burial site of Juan Cabrillo, of the Portuguese sailor. It's either Catalina or here. So pick your choice. And this is 16 miles from Betcher's Bay and 22 miles from Forney's Cove. So if you're in the western end of Santa Cruz Island, if conditions are good, making a run over to San Miguel is a good thing to do, because not a lot of people come out here.
Right.
Yeah, if you've come out here, even on a spectacularly perfect, favorable day, you'll probably be the only one out there. and maybe with a commercial trawler, because that's who are most of the frequent travelers who are up there, commercial fishermen who are going up and down the coast. So they'll duck in and they'll get their rest and et cetera, and then keep them fishing.
It's totally exposed to the wind coming around.
Yeah. Well, you're not far from Point Conception, so if you ever rounded Point Conception going north, you're in for a beating. So here's another thing. So this is Kyler Harbor. It looks real pretty, but it can be chock full of seaweed, of kelp. So you do have to be mindful of that. So once you get over there, then you kind of have to, just be mindful of the kelp. Because you can find a good anchorage. It's just making sure you kind of are self-sufficient out there, because help is not nearby. And the nice thing about Santa Barbara, it's not that far away. They got a wonderful waterfront there, and San Ynez wine country. And then, so an overlooked island is Santa Barbara Island. I think it's a really cool place because it is, for a sailor, it's typically just a reach back and forth. So while to St. Catalina, it's kind of downwind from here. Channel, the Anacapa, you're headed upwind. But going here, man, you got the wind on the beam, and you can get there lickety split really, really nicely. It is the small. It's very small, but there is a good anchorage right here on this side. There is a ranger station. One person lives up in that house there, and you can tuck. So I'm anchored here. This rock is actually this from a different perspective. And I'm anchored, you can anchor kind of nice and close to that. And because the closer you are, the better wind screen you get from the island. Because just kind of like Santa Rosa, it doesn't have a high mountaintop. And if the wind starts to increase in speed, it kind of comes right over that island and shoots down into the water. So the closer you are nestled in there, the better.
Crazy kelp deck.
Yeah, lots of kelp, especially I've dove in this area on a really nice day, and it's super nice diving. You'll see just giant rays, sea lions, looking at you, giant sea bass all over the place. But it's really cool. There's actually on that side, there's a big blowhole.
Is there?
Yeah.
What? No, I know where.
So I wish I had a video. I should have put a video of it, but it's a really nice blow, and it's where the sea lion rookery is.
Betty.
And a lot of kelp. A few words of advice. It's a great feeling of solitude because you are out there and you will see the Milky Way. If you have a clear sky, the Milky Way is right there. Have at least 2 days of additional food and water because you never know what conditions might kind of keep you there, or you may want to stay a little bit. But knowing that the coast is not that far away. Have an adequate anchor and rode and carry a secondary anchor. Be aware of wind and weather forecasts and choose. I always like to choose anchorages. I like to think about like a couple days ahead and have a second option available. If an anchorage, if you get there early enough so that you can kind of have an idea if it's suitable. If it's not, then you can go to another place and try it out there. But always have a second option that's available. And there are no moorings because you do have to be comfortable anchoring. So if you want to practice anchoring, go there because you're going to practice one way or the other, and you're going to learn. I've learned, sometimes the hard way, but you do learn, and so it is pretty forgiving because of the sandy bottoms, which is nice. So you're not dropping anchors on rocks. Cell phone service is mostly good on the mainland-facing side of the islands. But on the other side, forget it. You're not going to have any communications on the other side, except VHF. Fog is a problem, it can be a problem. So radar, really, I would say is a must up there. I know people think that AIS is a good solution, et cetera, but it's not going to help you.
Just tells you what you're about.
Yeah, physically, because radar has saved my bacon a few times up there, because when I'm trying to find a cove and going along a shoreline, and I got the chart plotter, like I hope GPS is giving me the right information, but the radar will physically give me the terrain or objects that are out there, and that helps a lot of confidence with what you've honest. And bring fishing tackle and license, because the fishing up there is absolutely wonderful. So, every night, as in the afternoon, before we're setting up for an evening, we'll just stop in a place, typically on the edge of a kelp bed, drop anchor, and drop some lines in, and we'll have dinner in 10 or 15 minutes. And just frozen squid. That's all we usually have. So the most common fish we caught were these kind of white ocean fish, and they're absolutely delicious. So.
What's it called?
White ocean fish.
Keeping it simple.
Yeah, ocean whitefish. That's the ocean whitefish.
Okay.
Ocean whitefish. So you'll catch a calico bass every once in a while, but these are the most common ones. And this is a pretty fully grown one. So that's a nice dinner for a couple people. And this is the Channel Islands fox. So this is the fox that's indigenous to those islands up there. So it doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. They're super small. You'd think it's almost like a cat. Yeah, it's very small. There's nothing nearby to kind of give it some scale.
It looks pretty.
Catalina. So the Catalina one, as I understand it, is a separate species.
Oh, Catalina fox.
Yeah, Catalina fox. Channel Islands fox is another one. I've only seen it on Santa Cruz. So that's.
Do we know how he got there?
No. Oh,
No.
swam.
Well, I mean,
So
I rode the Naos.
yeah. But again, that documentary, West of the West, it's on Amazon Prime. And so 2 episodes, an hour each, and they do an excellent job going over the history, the archaeological history, the anthropology, the origins of the islands, the wildlife, and also the human presence on the island goes back about 10,000 years, which is really kind of cool. Yeah.
Is there a sailor's guide you might recommend?
There's actually a few. There's Landfall Navigation that has one. You can find them on Amazon, pretty good. But I like history kind of stuff, and this is kind of cool because in here she actually talks about that painted cave, just like you saw it. I mean, it's really kind of cool that someone wrote this account, over 100 years or 130 years ago, and the experience you get is exactly the same. That hasn't changed.
How simple. It's cool.
Have you been in there? Oh, it is really cool. Yeah, it's and in the documentary they liken the Channel Islands to the Galapagos for California, because it is, like I said, we don't have anything else like this one.
Yeah.
So, all right, that finishes my presentation. Anyone have any questions?
Awesome.
All right, thank you, Dan. Thank you.